maybe you wouldn't like my advice, and which is don't do it for the money. Only do it because you want to make connections to people.
Hello, I'm Justin Hardman, and welcome to today's Education Vanguard. I'm really excited to be joined by Michael Boll. Michael is a collaborator from many moons ago at 21C and is a very exciting guest because he was, in fact, the founder and previous host of this podcast feed, doing over 100 episodes. And I don't think I've acknowledged that yet, so really want to acknowledge Michael for kicking this off. I don't even know what year it was, Michael. Was it like 2014 or 2013? It was a long time ago
I
now, but
remember because you laid me off and I was upset and I said to you, one day, Justin, you'll do this again. You'll have to do it on your own and I'll come back and haunt
yeah.
you on a future interview.
Well, this was my long-term play, Michael. I got you to start the
Yeah.
podcast, bank up a lot of episodes so I could take over 10 years later.
Actually, it went through COVID. So it was 2020. It went through
Yeah,
COVID.
it was actually a fairly, I think we had
Yeah.
some quiet periods and busier periods, but yeah, it was until
Yeah.
2020, so 5 years later. But yeah, I've known Michael since his days at Concordia, Shanghai, where he was a technology coordinator. And it's fair to say Michael has worn many hats over the years, from technology leader in school, an OG podcaster, which I want to ask Michael about, school founder, online instructor, nonprofit collaborator, web designer, tons and tons of things. You've known someone a long time and that someone does a lot of things when you type their name into your Gmail and you get about 12 different email addresses. So Michael is one
Oh,
of
yeah.
those people for me. At the moment, he supports SENIA International, an organization his wife leads, which champions inclusion by empowering a global community to connect, learn, and advocate for one another. He supports his son at home, Braden, and also some other nonprofit work. So welcome, Michael, to the Education Vanguard.
Well, it's fun to catch up after all these years.
It really is, Michael. Yeah, we
And we
should.
spent like the first 30 minutes just actually catching up.
We did, yeah. It was
Uh,
good to catch up with Michael in the so-called green room.
Justin, you may or may not know this, but you had a big influence on me working with your organization. I learned so much about how these conferences and programs and education and all that works, and all the different programs and processes that really helped me in life, and then later to help Senya. So I just would look at my "What would Justin do" bracelet, and that helped me choose appropriate technology.
Well, and the same back to you, Michael, actually. And, I think in terms of setting up processes and all of those kind of things, it's definitely something I look to you. And actually searching through the Google Drive when we were kind of restarting the podcast, I was surfacing all these documents that you had made years
Oh,
ago, and,
I'm
and
sorry.
definitely, no, no, definitely very helpful for sure. Before we get further in, though, I wonder if you could just give a little bit of background to yourself, because I could have gave you a very quick overview there, but it would be great if you could sort of just introduce yourself, give a bit of a background to your international school journey, professional journey.
Okay, well, I'm going to always make sure I don't start by saying I'm Michael because everybody knows that, even though I just did that. But anyways, I started my international school journey on the island of Saipan, which is a U.S. Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, where they would hire you if you just had a pulse, and I had one at the time, which is great. So I worked there for a couple of years, went back to the U.S., picked up a teaching credential, master's degree, and then did, I guess, my real international school experience in Saudi Arabia. Worked there 4 years, went to Indonesia, was there 3 years. Turned out my son had autism. We're like, oh my gosh. So we had to go freak out to do that. We went back to the United States and hung out in Denver, Colorado. And then we're like, oh, looks like that's the end of our overseas experience. But it turned out there was a school for people with special needs in China, in Shanghai. And so my wife, Lori, worked there, and I worked at Concordia, which is how I guess I ran into you, because that's part of the HKS world from the old days. And then it was from there, Bangkok, Thailand, and now back here in Bend, Oregon. And now I help. I'm not teaching anymore. So after about 25 years, my wife and I both stopped teaching, and she runs Senya, and I help her a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you mentioned there that one aspect of your journey is you do have a son with profound IDD. And can you talk a little bit about, because I know it's had a massive effect in terms of your life as that does. And can you talk more about the impact that that's had on your journey?
Yeah, so I probably defined our journey. Well, you have kids, so you have kids, and it's like, oh, I'm changing my life and making decisions based on my kids. And when you have an individual with a profound intellectual disability, autism in this case, you have to chart your course for what's going to happen in his life. How are you going to take care of him? So he could never attend an international school. They wouldn't accept him. Schools would today, but not back in those days. So there was really no school for him, which is why we originally went back to the US. And then once we found there was a school in Shanghai, he attended there. And then that didn't work out after a few years. So we built our own school called Shine Academy back in the day, and so that he would have a place to go. So he and some others that were in similar educational situations. And there were schools, though, available for him in Bangkok. So when we moved there, there was a place for him to go. And then as he got older, he was in an adult work program, which is probably the best program he's ever been in. Something you can't get here nearly as easy in the US, that taught him a ton of skills and was in a really nice environment and a happy place for him to be with his friends. So it was always just sort of figuring out a way to go for him and making sure whatever school or place that we went to could satisfy both him and our daughter's needs because she could go to school with us. And then, kind of as a result of it, really more Lori than me, she went and got a second master's in special education. And then she joined SENIA as a board member when it was just run by a group of teachers each year. And then she became their executive director. And that's what she does now, today, full time.
Yeah. I think your I think your profound modesty is really amazing, Michael. I've always loved that about you, is that, you sort of casually dropped, oh, we started a school for our son because there wasn't one. Most people
Well, that
are,
was fun.
most people,
Sometimes.
wouldn't say that. I think that's really kind of amazing that all of the things that you've done for the love of your kids.
Yeah, and the community.
Yeah.
We double down by trying to help the community as well, and then you get even more satisfaction from it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really incredible. And one of the things that you did, and actually we've never really talked about this a lot, so I'm keen to hear more about it, is that in order to sort of better understand your son, and when you're starting the journey of supporting your son, you started a podcast, and it's still your monkey on Twitter, Autism Podcast. Can you talk about that journey? Because I mean, really, you were like an OG podcast. You're doing podcasting. Everyone's got a podcast now, but back in the day, you were kind of early to it. So can you talk about that journey?
Yeah, well, the dirty little secret about me is that I tended to do things that, while they helped my son, I found interesting too. So, like starting a school to me was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of fun. So, it hasn't been this giant sacrifice in a lot of ways. And that was true with the podcast as well. So, that was back in 2003, and when podcasting was just starting with RSS and all those old terms
Hmm.
from the day. And there was a guy named Leo Laporte who does one of the first podcasts called This Week in Tech. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I was listening to it. And then he would have connections and tutorials on how to build it on your own. So I thought, that's kind of neat. I should do that someday. And then when I got back to the US, I was like, oh, I have a son with autism. It'll take me a minute. You're welcome
Yeah,
to include this.
no, that's okay.
No, I don't mind. I wasn't planning on crying today. Okay, 2 deep breaths. Anyways, so yeah, so I was like, I need to learn a lot about autism and how it all works. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? Start this podcast because that's kind of fun, and then I'm going to interview experts all over the world who normally charge $300 or $400 an hour, and that's what got me going. And since the people, well, one, people like to talk about themselves, and two, podcasting was a relatively new medium at the time, so there wasn't much competition. That's what got me into it and got me in all these great connections and to talk with all these great people, and for me to learn a ton about autism.
That's amazing. I just think how you took your something that you needed to do and turned it into something that helped you, but also helped the whole community out there. I mean, that really shows the power of what you do, but also just the power of these tools as well. I think it's really profound, actually.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, suddenly you could reach all these people
yeah,
and give back to this community in a way that you never could before at scale.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure that those connections that you made through that still pay dividends and have influenced other things that you've done as well, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. It got me
Yeah.
going in the podcast world and learning how to do it and how to be on a microphone and all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So yeah, what advice do you give to people now that are starting podcasts? I mean, I've started this now. I should have really reached out to you earlier in this journey, but I'm keen to know what advice you give to people that are just starting out like me.
Well, maybe you wouldn't like my advice, which is don't do it for the money. Only do it because you want to make connections to people. Now, back in the day when I was doing autism podcasts, I would get like 3 to 5,000 downloads per podcast, which I didn't know was a large number at the time. But
Wow.
like if I was to do a podcast today, I wouldn't get anything near that one. It's just too much competition out there. And so the main reason to do it is to make that connection with the individual that
Hmm.
you want to get to know, and then maybe you want to do something together to build a greater good or for a business reason or whatever. Because there's something about doing a podcast where the person bears their soul and then they get emotionally connected to. So whenever I've done podcasts, when I did them for 21C, I was usually podcasting with people who would be speakers at one of the conferences. And then when I'd see them, they'd be like, Mike, and they give me a big hug and all that. And it's like, well, I mean, you don't know much about me. I just asked a bunch of questions about you, but now you feel kind of connected to me because you were emotionally vulnerable.
I totally agree, and certainly this is not about the money. And I actually, I would say that in some ways this is very like it's not therapy for me, but it's nice to just take 30 minutes, 40 minutes just to chat with someone for a bit, right? And if that's useful to someone else, then great. If it's useful for the 21C and the business, that's great. But actually, I think doing this just for the conversation, just for the connection, I think is why I'm doing this.
Yeah, and in my original day with the with autism podcast, it was more for just learning and
Mm,
sharing. But then later on, it was more like connecting. So
yeah.
if you want to become an administrator, then what you should do is interview administrators all over the world in international schools, and then you'll be that
Hmm.
person.
Hmm. Yeah, and you did it for, I mean, how many episodes did you have of that podcast, that original
I
podcast?
think about 110, 120, and then I moved to
Yeah.
China, and then just the bandwidth just got too bad because they
Hmm.
started, cutting everything off, and I just couldn't connect to people in the U.S. anymore.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it's an amazing journey. And then you've had several podcasts since then, right? You did the ones at Concordia.
The Ed Tech podcast, Tech Tuesday, yeah, and then the Vanguard, and then Lori does a podcast for SENIA. So
Yeah, no, really, really great stuff. And as we mentioned earlier, you're someone who's involved in like many, many different projects. How do you decide where to spend your time? How do you balance all of the many, many things that you're doing? I'm curious about that.
Asana, the task management system.
Oh, really?
But that doesn't really answer the question. So, well, the truth is, whatever happens to be the most interesting at the moment satisfies my apparent ADD. But the reality is probably what fits with my mission, which is to advocate for the special needs community. So, whatever, when I'm like, gosh, this is too much. What do I need to take a break on? Then I try to look at like, what can I do that's going to have the most impact on the community? And so I try to get involved in the local community where Lori with Senia gets involved in the global community. So that's kind of the difference between the two of us and our focuses. But generally,
Hmm.
yeah, whatever's going to benefit again the special needs community is probably where I focus the most.
Yeah. So when you say the local community, you're talking about the local nonprofit that you're on the board of in Oregon, right?
Yeah, and just in Bend, Oregon in general,
Yeah.
where I live.
No, that's great. Yeah. What can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that group do, and how do you support them?
So I'm the president of the board of a group that provides services for adults with IDD. My son actually gets services for the county. This is the non-county version. And so they're coordinators for services. So somebody comes in and helps, they help them to get their Social Security going in the US, help them get their medical going. If they need testing, they help them with testing. They help them with the state government to get funding, help them with housing, help them just meet friends and join groups. They help them, if they like to ski, learn about various organizations that help them ski, things like that. So just help them live their best lives within the community itself. And so that's the board I serve on because it's kind of fun to be part of a group like that that helps that group of people, which I'm so committed to.
Hmm. That's great. And you mentioned the Senya, and I mentioned Senya before. Could you talk more about Senya? What's the story of Senya, and what does it do now, and how does it operate, and what's its mission and vision, and how does it do act on that?
Sure, sure. So SENIA's been around 20 plus years now, started by some teachers in Beijing many years ago who thought, hey, we should have a conference for the kids, the varied learners that we have. But it has grown since COVID when Lori became the international director and he could devote somebody to it full time. And so now its vision is to live in an inclusive world. And so the way it does that is it has conferences, so it has virtual and in-person conferences, and it has courses, online courses, where people can become SENIA certified teachers or assistant teachers or paralegals or para teachers, whatever you might call them. And then as well, they have these connections that go through communities and local chapters. So there's local chapters in about 20 different areas. And then there's giving programs, scholarships that are given to teachers who want to take coursework or to students who are doing really cool things that we want to recognize in the community. So that's kind of the four areas that SENIA does its work in.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, fundamentally, it's a very community-based organization, right? Because you do have all those local chapters in different cities that are feeding up into the wider, the bigger organization, the global organization.
Right. Like the mothership, yeah.
Yeah. And I've really admired seeing Senior grow over the years. Has been amazing to see, from the outside. I remember having an early call with Laurie and some of the other board members when you guys were just setting up the
Oh
organize.
yeah,
This
yeah, yeah.
before
Right.
before it was like a proper organization, right?
Mm.
And yeah, and then just before the call, I was asking for your advice on how to do it. So it's really, really, really incredible what you've done. And I think, school international. I'm actually curious what because you mentioned earlier, back in the day, Braden wouldn't have been able to go to wasn't able to go to an international school, but now he would, at least in some cases. So, yeah, there's been a big evolution, right, in what international schools are able to do, and I imagine that Senior's played a role in that actually, right, in advocacy and everything, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because it's created a structure, in a lot of ways, a permission structure
Mm,
for heads of school to say, you know what, we can't actually work with those kids. Like we could have worked with them for the last 100 years, but today we actually can. So schools
yeah.
had chosen for a long time they wanted to be more elite and send all their kids to Harvard, and now they're realizing, oh, if you have a more inclusive global community of all types of learners, there's
Mm,
benefit to that.
yeah. But I mean, would you say there's still a fair ways to go with international schools on that front?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it kind of reminds me in the old days when technology first came out. And it's like, oh, you're a laptop school. I've always wanted to be a laptop school. Oh, you have
Mm,
projectors in your classroom, and then after over a period of time, everybody had projectors. Everybody had laptops,
mm,
and there's that same similar excitement that I remember we used to feel in the early days of technology. Of oh, here it
mm.
goes. We're running with it. That's kind of where SENIA is right now with inclusive education.
Yeah, it's sort of on the upswing, you would say, in terms of schools.
Yeah, there's still a
Well,
lot of runway left.
yeah. Well, that's
I
really
mean,
great to
it'll be
hear.
nice if SENIA works itself out of business at some point.
Yeah, but it never will though, right? Because, as more schools bring it on, there's always learning, right? There's always ways that you need to grow and develop. So I think that the importance of senior will never go away. I mean, that's what we used to say, and to use your analogy, we used to say on, the ed tech people will work themselves out of a job, but it doesn't seem like that's happened, I don't think, in the
No, no.
years
Now they're
years
more, I guess,
since.
integration type people and all that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So it changes the name, but the need doesn't go away, I don't think.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, big congratulations to Laurie and you and everything that Senya's achieved over the years. Really, really, really great stuff.
Yeah, well, it's definitely her. I just get like, hey, go build this. Okay.
We all play our role, Michael, I think.
That's true, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, what's next for you, Michael? Any new projects on the horizon that I'm sure there is. There seems to always be with you.
Actually, there aren't a ton. I just kind of been doing my stuff maintenance mode, I guess. Like it's not like we're looking to go to the next post or anything like that. We still get to travel because of conferences that Lori attends around. Like we're off to Costa Rica in a week or so
Hmm.
because there's conferences down there where she is working for Senya. Yeah, I'm sounding kind of boring. Like, at 58, like, you're thinking of retirement in 7 years or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's more of
well,
just enjoying life, hanging out, and doing what you can within the community. But there's nothing I'd like to, well, just personally, I guess I'd like to work more on housing opportunities for people in the disabled community here because it's
hmm
an expensive place and working with other nonprofits to figure out a way to make more opportunities for people to live at a reduced rate.
that sounds amazing. I mean, that the housing is like a number one concern worldwide, right? But it affects, I'm sure, people with needs more so than mainstream
Yeah, because they don't have
people.
high
Yeah,
paying jobs, for example.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. That sounds like a definitely a worthy project to invest your time.
okay,
And
I'll do it.
and
I'm gonna check the box. Yeah.
and will Senia bring you to this part of the world, to East Asia, anytime soon? I'll see if I can get travel
Well, our next
scheduled.
conference is in Dubai,
Uh-huh.
and then I'm sure it'll be back. I don't know for sure. It'll be back in Asia after that.
Okay.
So because Asia is kind of the hub where the majority of the people are. So we're trying
Yeah.
Dubai because then that pulls in people from Africa and Europe, and it's still
Mm,
one flight from Asia. So
okay.
we'll see.
Yeah, and I'd love to know here how that goes in Dubai for sure, because that's definitely an area of the world that we'd like to explore at some point. If I can
Yeah.
manage to get some more months in the year or hours in the day.
Well,
But
that's not going to happen, unfortunately. But
oh,
yeah,
really? Okay, that's too bad.
yeah.
I was hoping you'd
I've been
invented some.
checking. That's help.
Yeah, got a Google alert on that one. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Well, it's been great to catch up, Michael, both
Yeah,
over the
Justin.
before the call and also during the podcast. And once again, just amazing all of the work you've done over the years. And through the podcast, I know you've reached out to many people to learn from, but I think you're definitely someone for others to reach out and learn from, and so modest about everything you do. So it's been really, really wonderful to chat with you today.
Yeah, and Lori and myself and the SENIA community are always happy to help anybody who's got a question.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, have a good one.
All right, thank you.